Hey, what's up, guys? It's Mario. Come back to talk about fantasy football again. So for this video, what I'm going to be doing, this is a request of Nathan. He's been a good fan, really commenting a lot, trying to give a lot of feedback, so I really appreciate that. So he had a request today for me to talk about players that I think are going to be bust this year in the draft, or throughout the fantasy football season. And so I'm going to talk about that to a degree. I don't really like to use the word bust, though, just as a heads up, just because I feel like players' values can change throughout the season, so there's people that I'm going to avoid throughout the whole season. I'm going to tell you that on my list here of who I'm going to include as bust. But there's people that I'm not. These are more just a list right now of who I'm not drafting based on their value being out of proportion to what I think it's going to actually be right now. But granted, as the season goes along, that might change. So I wouldn't necessarily categorize them as like bust throughout the whole season right now, but just guys that I'm personally going to avoid in the draft over the next few weeks before the season starts, just based on that value, just based on the way their value matches up to how I actually think they're going to perform. So just as a clarification, but I'll talk about those and I'll mention the ones that I think are just going to be bust throughout the whole season. So yeah, just wanted to clarify that, but that's going to be what I'm going to be talking about today. So a few quick hypothetical questions that I noticed, and basically I got these off Yahoo Sports, just like the overall question poll, and if you want, so I'm gonna try to start doing this. I'm gonna include some hypothetical questions that I see on there, and kind of bring them up as talking point discussion. So if you have questions with regards to this stuff, comment it or send me a message or something like that, and I'll try to include that on the show. So and kind of answer some of those questions. So. Two quick questions that I noticed on Yahoo Sports under the Yahoo Answers page. So somebody was offered a trade proposal, and they were wondering what should I do in this trade. So they were offered Michael Thomas and Le'Veon Bell for David Johnson and Jarvis Landry. And in my personal opinion, and that's for a PPR league. So that's not even a question for me, to be honest. David Johnson has a very shaky offensive line this year. There's a lot of questions about how that team is going to do. Jarvis Landry underperformed last year, aside from the last 4 weeks of the season. Whereas Michael Thomas, especially in PPR, he is clearly the number one receiver for New Orleans. He's going to get a ton of volume from Drew Brees. And Le'Veon Bell, I don't have the best outlook for Le'Veon Bell this season, but still, I think Le'Veon Bell might have a better season than David Johnson. They're both right about even with each other. But if you take both of them out, Michael Thomas is easily better than Jarvis Landry. So, that's not even a question to me. You accept that trade because Michael Thomas is a huge upgrade over Jarvis Landry, even if Johnson and Bell cancel each other out. And then a really interesting point of discussion is what should I do with the number 4 pick? So this guy, so basically in the draft, there's a pretty clear top 3 that are going to get taken. It's Saquon Barkley, then it's going to be Christian McCaffrey probably, then Alvin Kamara. And then for a while it was pretty much universally going to be Zeke Elliott. Even maybe sometimes Kamara would be at 4 and Zeke would be at 3. But Zeke is still holding out, so is he going to pull Le'Veon Bell from last year? So there's questions should I then draft Le'Veon Bell at that position? Should I then draft David Johnson at that position? And my answer is you don't draft any of those 3. I personally would really take a hard look at either Devontae Adams or DeAndre Hopkins at that point, because those are both very consistent receivers. And especially if you're in a PPR league, those guys are going to get a ton of volume. They're both very consistent PPR players last year. I think I like Devontae Adams a little more for the overall outlook of those two, but if you want to play value and maybe try to get Saquon Barkley after a week 1 performance or something like that, then take DeAndre Hopkins because in the first game they're playing the Saints. But still, the number 4 pick is very interesting, and that's honestly where I would least want to draft because there's so many questions about what you should do in that position. But honestly, personally, at least the way I'm seeing it right now is I would take one of those 2 receivers at number 4. I wouldn't take either of those 3 running backs because there's too many questions about them right now. What if you draft Zeke Elliott and he just holds out the whole season? Then you just basically wasted the number 4 overall pick. So I'd hate for that to happen to anybody. But, then again, Zeke Elliott is kind of a bit of a head case, so you don't really know what he's going to do. All right, so let's get into the bust. And I'll kind of add some annotations. But basically, the reason I'm categorizing these players as bust is because I think their value doesn't match up to where they're going in these mock drafts. So, when I start off at QB and I say Patrick Mahomes is a bust, I do not think he is going to be a bust. I think he is going to have a good season, but people are reaching for him very high and they should not be. So, the reason I get upset when I do these mock drafts and I see Patrick Mahomes getting taken in like the third round is because you're literally sacrificing yourself like number one receivers on teams that are going to get a lot of volume, going to get a lot of points. You know, running backs that could have, if you redrafted by the end of the season, should have been first-round talent like Aaron Jones, Kerryon Johnson, and they're taking Patrick Mahomes over them. But Patrick Mahomes' performance, I mean, unless he has an amazing season like last year, more than likely he's going to fall in the same range as guys like Deshaun Watson, guys like Andrew Luck if he actually plays, maybe Matt Ryan, maybe Lamar Jackson even if he explodes because of all that rushing value. Like there's so many quarterbacks that you can plug in that are going to give you decent value. Like Mahomes is a standout, and this is exactly why I get upset about Aaron Rodgers too, is because like people sacrifice all that talent that they could have at running back and receiver to get a quarterback that they could replicate the same value with a later quarterback that's going to get drafted at the end. So, yeah, so be careful with that. But I don't think Patrick Mahomes is going to be a bad player, but I'm not drafting him right now because I know people are going to reach for him. Which is why I don't draft Aaron Rodgers at all ever, too. And I'm probably not going to draft him at all anyway because there's a lot of questions about Aaron Rodgers unlike with Patrick Mahomes. So another QB that I think is going to be a bust is Russell Wilson. As I talked about in the previous video, like they have a good first matchup, so I would consider him as a week one target if he falls to me at about his range. But that team is going to be trying to run the ball more, and Russell Wilson is not utilizing his rushing ability as much as he did in the past. So I'm really skeptical about him, especially at his value that he's going at. Same thing with Drew Brees. I think he will also kind of be a bust too because they're trying to rely more on their running game. And yes, Drew Brees is going to have his games where he's going to be good, but he's going to be have some games that he's really going to struggle, I think. And, any game in the Dome, I think I would start Drew Brees, but then if he's on the road, I would potentially start to consider sitting him because he's starting to get a little older. Like, maybe that magic that he's had is going to start dwindling off. And, kind of the same thing with Ben Roethlisberger. Like, he was the number 3 quarterback last year, but that was throwing a lot to Antonio Brown, and he was. Now that he doesn't have him, like there's questions there. I think he's still going to be a good play, but there's going to. Even last year, he had very inconsistent games, and I would just rather stay away from him, especially because he doesn't provide any rushing value for you. And a player who pretty much encapsulates all the problems that I discussed among those other 3 quarterbacks is Tom Brady. And you should just avoid Tom Brady at all in fantasy football. Like, I don't know why anybody would draft him, but there's people that do because he's never going to give you any rushing yards. His passing yards are going to be like questionable at times because maybe they're just going to run the whole game. Like, you never know what Belichick's going to do. I would just stay away from Tom Brady. All right, so running backs. I already talked about this player to a degree is David Johnson. Like, I don't know if you watched that game against Oakland, but like they like literally could not. The offensive line literally could not like stay on its heels. Like it was just like getting blitzed the whole time. But it's against the Oakland defense. Like that's not a good defense at all. So like, what's going to happen when these guys have to play the Rams twice this season? When they play the Seahawks, which is already like. I mean, they're not as good as they were, but they're known as a defensive team. Like, I just have a lot of questions about how David Johnson is actually going to do. I mean, if you're in PPR, I would maybe consider taking him in the first round, but otherwise I would kind of try to avoid him. So, just telling you that now. I'm not taking David Johnson. Damien Williams is another one of those that I'm not very high on right now. Probably not going to take it all because the Chiefs, they basically like used the only reason that David Williams was on the depth chart last year was because Kareem Hunt got suspended and then Spencer Ware got hurt and they were down to their 3rd running back. And he managed to thrive, or I guess barely thrive in that position. But like now they have like a rookie named Darwin Thompson who's looking pretty good in the preseason, and he is going at the very end of the draft. Like, that is a huge steal that you want. And I think that eventually he's going to overtake Damien Williams for that number one running back position. So just avoid Damien Williams because I think that that's only going to give you a value for the first few weeks, and then they're going to work in some other guys. Or maybe even get a trade. Like, that'd be a huge plot twist if they trade for Melvin Gordon, by the way, but I don't think that's going to happen. So speaking of Melvin Gordon, that's my next tier. I'm going to put him and Zeke Elliott kind of in the same reason of why I'm not drafting them / calling them bust for now is because you don't know like when or if they're going to even play. So I would not take them, and I'm not going to like rule them out for the whole season, but I'm just saying like I'm not taking them right now because what if they don't play the whole season? Then you basically just waste a draft pick for a guy that's just going to hold out the whole season. But, you know, their value is going to, let's say they continue their holdouts through the start of the regular season and then they miss the first few weeks. Like, their value is going to plummet, and then that's when you pounce on the opportunity, especially when news comes out, like says something like, oh, Zeke Elliott says, I don't want to play for Jerry Jones anymore, or something like along those lines, which it's going to happen because it's Dallas, and they love like crazy news articles. But anyway, like that's when you pounce on him, and then you throw in like third or fourth round value, and you get first round value running back if he comes back, because like even if he doesn't come back like by fourth round pick, like you're not really like losing a ton. You're not losing one of your core pieces like your first, second, third round pick maybe. But then you could return like first round value if he then signs midway through the season. So like don't waste that number one pick on him, but still consider pursuing him throughout the season, because then either of those two could give you tons of value, especially if they don't play the first few weeks, for a cheaper cost than a first round pick. I hope that makes sense. So let me know if you have questions about that. And then, okay, so then just players I'm avoiding altogether, no questions asked. Sony, Michel. I've already explained why I don't like New England running backs and just avoid them. I've already explained why I don't like Philadelphia Eagles running backs, so avoid Miles Sanders because I do not see him taking over the lead back position, because I think they're going to work in those other guys like Corey Clement, Wendell Smallwood, Jordan Howard. Like, it's just going to be an absolute mess. Speaking of absolute mess, the San Francisco 49ers running backs, just avoid them. Like, don't take Tevin Coleman, don't take Matt Breida, don't take Jerick McKinnon. And then I'm also going to avoid Lamar Miller because I think Duke Johnson is going to take away a lot of his PPR value. Lamar Miller is on the last year of his contract anyway, and he's kind of underperformed. So I could see them integrating Duke Johnson more. I just feel like Lamar Miller's value is pretty much higher than he actually is as a player. All right, so wide receivers now. So, and if you notice, I'm kind of going in like the order in which these guys are getting drafted for the most part. I am not drafting Antonio Brown at all. Like, all the news that's come out about him has basically proven to me that like this guy is not committed to anything except for money and himself and creating hype. So, and honestly, I think he's doing all this because he literally realizes that like, oh, I'm not as good as I was, so now I have to like make up my talent with creating headlines about myself so I can stay relevant. Like, that's the same thing that Kevin Durant does with the Warriors when he was playing with them, is that like he was mad about how like Steph Curry would like gets all the credits, and then he creates some kind of dramatic event or says something, or like forgets to sign out of his burner account on Twitter where he's arguing with fans or some nonsense. It's just like just absolute immaturity. I think this guy is not going to be ready for the season, and I'm just going to avoid him because like what if he just like he's the type of guy that would just sit out the whole season because of the helmet or something. Like, so just don't waste your time with him. But again, like consider pursuing him if he drops all the way into the third round, and that's maybe you take a flyer on him. But he's still got a lot of talent and value. But I'm not wasting a first round pick or even a second round pick on him, to be honest. Okay, so other receivers, Tyler Lockett. I already talked about him some. I think his value is going to drop because he had a pretty inflated touchdown per catch ratio last year. I'm not drafting Alshon Jeffrey either because I think that he's not a consistent player. And I do not like the Eagles' as a team in general in fantasy football because they're like the Patriots in that they spread the ball around so much. The only guy that I really like is Zach Ertz because that's just like him and Wentz have this like great like connection. And then Allen Robinson, like same with the Bears, like they don't have any standout receivers and like I potentially like Anthony Miller to step up, but like Allen Robinson has like been a guy that's had a lot of potential, but like never really like taken advantage of it, and consistently goes higher than he actually performs. Interesting take here, but I'm cautious about Stefon Diggs. There's a lot of news that comes out about why you shouldn't draft. I've been seeing stuff about like why you shouldn't be drafting Adam Thielen because they're going to be trying to use Dalvin Cook more. And yeah, I see that. But I mean, I think Adam Thielen actually has a stronger rapport with Cousins than Diggs does. Because Adam Thielen, like, he's just so consistent. Like, he never drops the ball. Stefon Diggs is more of the explosive player. So, I mean, I see Adam Thielen still maintaining a pretty consistent value even if they use Dalvin Cook more. I see Stefon Diggs as potentially the one that has more duds. So I would avoid Stefon Diggs. But I'm not giving up on Adam Thielen. I think Adam Thielen is still going to maintain his value, but just keep in mind on that. A lot of people are low on Adam Thielen because of that supposed theory. And then guys I'm just not drafting at all. I'm not drafting Sammy Watkins. Again, another guy that's just never really proven anything, especially over the last 3 seasons. Larry Fitzgerald because he's like old and decrepit at this point, and he's got, again, another bad offensive line that I don't even know how they're going to play. And then Desean Jackson, like, yes, he could give you a touchdown, but like, what is he going to do with the Eagles? Like, there's so many questions there. I would just avoid him, to be honest, because I think that's, again, inconsistent value that you're going to get. All right, and then there's other receivers I could go into too, but I'm just kind of summarizing the main ones that generally have higher value. Tight ends. Hunter Henry, like, just don't do it. Like, this guy is, I mean, yes, there's potential that he could fill the Antonio Gates void that Philip Rivers loves to throw to tight ends with Antonio Gates, but frankly, Hunter Henry has never stayed healthy and never really produced that much, so I just don't see it. I'm just being honest, like, just avoid him. That's similar to the void filling. Like, there's also that same kind of thing with Vance McDonald. Like, people think he's going to fill the Antonio Brown value, but, like, again, another guy, and I think I even mentioned this too, like, part of the reason he has as much hype as he does is because, like, he had a catch last year where he stiff-armed a guy on the Buccaneers and then, like, ran for an 80-yard touchdown. But literally that play was probably, like, a quarter of his points the whole season. Like, and I mean, that's an exaggeration, but like, this guy is like not consistent at all. I don't know. Just stay away from Vance McDonald. I'm just telling you. Stay away from Mark Andrews. Like, I mean, I like the fantasy footballers, but like, I don't know why they have him as their number 10 tight end as their consensus. Like, just like Baltimore has Hayden Hurst. They have, I think his name is Nick Boyle. They have, like, another guy, I think, that they're trying to incorporate, too. It's just, like they could go to any of them. It's just, like, I don't understand, like, why you would think that one of them is going to stand out. I don't see that happening. So, again, like, I don't like muddled situations where, like, it's unclear, like, which tight end is going to stand out. And that's why I'm not high on the Colts tight ends. It's because Eric Ebron was the guy that stood out last year, but that's because Jack Doyle was hurt. Then they have Mo Alley Cox, who is like a very athletic player who converted from basketball. Like, I could see him getting more involved too because he's kind of got like a greater athletic ceiling than Ebron and Doyle do. And you know, and then they also have Devin Funchess now, who's like a big red zone target. Like, so I just see the value of Ebron going down so much from last year. It's just I don't know. I'm staying away from him personally. And then guys I am not drafting at all. Like, do not draft Jordan Reed. Like, that is an absolute waste of time. Like, this guy cannot stay healthy at all. And, like, even if he has a good game, like, do you think he's actually going to sustain that for the whole season? Like, I just don't see, like, if you, for some reason, happen to have Jordan Reed fall on you because you slipped into auto draft mode because you fell asleep or something. Like, to get rid of Jordan Reed at your quickest opportunity because he's most likely going to get hurt again, and then he's most likely not going to play half the season because that's just how he is. It's just, I don't know. I get frustrated about this because I'm a Redskins fan and I'm just tired of it. But anyway. And then Greg Olsen, like another guy that's just getting hurt a lot and has a lot of hype because of years past with Cam Newton, and like I just don't see it happening again. Like he's probably gonna break his foot again because he's literally broken his foot like 3 years in a row. All right. Defenses to avoid. So you have to be careful with defenses because somebody's going to reach for the Bears, and I think the Bears will be a good defense, but then kind of like quarterbacks, like people are then going to start panicking and reaching for defenses too high. And that is what's been going on with the Jags defense. And then some lunatics have even been taking the Jags defense above the Bears defense, which like, why would you do that? Did you literally not watch last season? Like, I just don't understand that. And especially like the Jags have played terrible this preseason. Like, I don't know if you've watched any of their games, but so, and on top of that, they're playing Kansas City in the first game. So, like, why would you draft them with your number one pick to start them the first week? Because of that matchup. Like, if you're going to go after the Jags, and see my previous video that I posted just before this one, you target them in a trade after week 1. Like, don't draft them and then start them because you're probably going to get negative points out of it. So, I'm just telling you that right now. I hope people actually listen to me. And then Houston, another defense that like they go high because of Jadeveon Clowney and J.J. Watt, but their pass defense has gotten worse, and they start off against the Saints, so I see that also being problematic. So avoid this defense as a draft pick. Maybe you can trade for them later, but I just don't like their whole overall season value to even justify that either. And then two teams that I also don't understand like why they're getting drafted as high as they are the Patriots. Like, their defense always starts slow. Or, not always, but that's the way the trend over the last, like, 5 years, is that they start off slow and then they've recovered and done a little better. So, especially they're playing Pittsburgh first, which is another good offense. So, there's just so much uncertainty of how that's going to look. And then, like, I don't know why people are thinking this, but, like, they're drafting the Browns within the top 10 defenses. Like, I mean, yes, the hype is like back there, but like, I mean, and they traded for Olivier Vernon, but like, look at the team he came from. He came from the Giants. Like, and was that a good defense? No. And like, is he gonna like miraculously turn around the Browns? Like, this isn't Khalil Mack we're talking about. So I don't even know. I don't understand like where that rationale is coming from at all. But avoid the Browns. I'm not drafting them as a defense either. Like, honestly, with defense, like I've just been finding like go with the matchup because a lot of people are reaching for them anyway and taking away some of these better running backs that I would recommend pouncing on. And then kickers, I'm avoiding. I've already talked about Stephen Gostowski. I'm not drafting him because of his hype. Adam Vinatieri, like I think he could have a good season, but again, another guy that goes higher because of his hype. And then I'm not drafting Jake Elliott because he just misses field goals consistently. And I don't know why people still consider him to actually be good. And then an interesting part of discussion, but like I just know that like Greg Zuerlein is going to get reached for, and I don't know if I'm willing to reach for him to do that because it's just I don't know. There's so much value with Greg Zuerlein, but at the same time, like, what if Todd Gurley's not healthy and that offense kind of struggles? I mean, they did not play well in the Super Bowl. Like, is that just a fluke game, or is that going to be, like, signs of things to come next year with those lingering Todd Gurley health issues? I don't know. So, maybe consider Greg Zuerlein as somebody that I wouldn't draft either. It's just, and I don't know. And there's different examples of this too, like, but these are the ones that stand out to me as ones that I'm avoiding. So, if you have any specific questions about any of these players, as you're wondering if I should draft or not draft, let me know and I'll try to do my best to answer it. Yeah, so what I'm hoping to do, and I'm going to try to see if I can do this in a video soon, is to make a league on ESPN or something like that. It's just going to kind of be like, I'll share with you my team. It's not like I'm just going up against the computer. It's not like it's up against people I know or whatever. And I'll kind of give you updates on my roster of what I'm doing throughout the season with that team, so then that way I can kind of show you like, hey, like, I'm thinking about making this trade, and, like, these are the players I have and why, and this is why I'm starting them. So that way it gives you, like, an example reference of, like, what I'm doing. Because I don't know about you, but it's kind of frustrating sometimes when you're trying to get advice from somebody and you don't know their team situation. So you don't know, like, like you don't know like who they're putting out there against their opponents. But if I do this on like a burner league, I guess they're just jump in to like ESPN or something. Like maybe I could kind of do that here and kind of give you some ideas to throw around. So anyway, hope that was helpful. Let me know what you think, and if you have any other questions or concerns, feel free to comment or ask, and I'll try to do my best to answer it. So cool. All right, thanks guys. Bye.